Tinder nightmare, Blaze Bernstein's tragic story. Light and darkness. It was a serene evening in Orange County, California. Blaze Bernstein, a 19-year-old college student with an infectious smile and endless potential, left his family home with a simple promise: "I'll be back soon." But that night, he would step into the shadows, never to return. By the following morning, his room remained untouched, his wallet, glasses, and keys still in place. The only thing missing was Blaze. What began as a desperate search would soon uncover a nightmare beyond comprehension. Blaze Bernstein wasn't just an ordinary teenager. Born on April 27, 1998, in Lake Forest, California, Blaze was the heart and soul of his family. A loving son, a doting sibling, and a fiercely loyal friend. He excelled in academics and creative pursuits, attending the prestigious University of Pennsylvania, where he explored his passion for creative writing and medicine. Blaze's family and friends described him as someone who could transform the ordinary into something extraordinary. He lived authentically, embracing his Jewish heritage and his identity as a gay man with pride and resilience. Blaze returned home for winter break in December 2017, bringing his warmth and humor back to the family he cherished. He spent those days cooking gourmet meals, lighting Hanukkah candles, and sharing stories about his plans for the future. Those precious moments, filled with laughter and love, would become the last memories his family would hold on to. On January 2, 2018, Blaze left home late in the evening. His parents didn't suspect anything unusual. Teenagers often come and go. But as morning came and Blaze failed to show up for a scheduled dental appointment, concern turned into alarm. His phone went straight to voicemail. He hadn't taken his wallet or retainer. Calls to his friends yielded no answers. Blaze had vanished without a trace. "We knew something was wrong," his mother later said. Blaze wasn't the type to disappear. This wasn't like him. The search for Blaze began immediately. Family, friends, and community members mobilized, distributing flyers and organizing search parties. But it wasn't until his parents accessed his Snapchat account that they uncovered the first real lead. A name: Samuel Woodward. Samuel was a former classmate of Blaze from the Orange County School of the Arts. When questioned, he claimed he had picked Blaze up late that night, and they had driven to Borrego Park to hang out. According to Samuel, Blaze had walked into the park to meet another friend, while he stayed behind in his car. He insisted he had no idea where Blaze had gone after that. His tone was calm, almost rehearsed, but something about his account felt off. "I want to find Blaze as much as you do," Samuel told Blaze's father during a phone call, a statement that would later be revealed as a cruel lie. For 8 agonizing days, the search for Blaze continued. Hope dwindled with each passing hour. Then, on January 10, 2018, after heavy rains shifted the earth in Borrego Park, investigators made a devastating discovery. Blaze's body was found buried in a shallow grave, covered with dirt and branches. He had been stabbed 28 times in what investigators described as an act of overkill, an attack fueled by intense rage. This wasn't just murder, a detective later said. This was personal. The revelation sent shockwaves through Blaze's family and the wider community. How could such a brutal act happen to someone so kind, so full of life? The focus quickly turned back to Samuel Woodward, the last person to see Blaze alive. A search of Samuel's car revealed damning evidence. Blood spatter on the headliner that matched Blaze's DNA. A further search of his home uncovered a knife crusted with blood. Despite his attempts to clean the weapon, the traces of his crime remained. But the deeper investigators delved into Samuel's life, the more disturbing the picture became. Samuel was not just a suspect, he was a ticking time bomb. A member of a Atomwaffen division, a neo-Nazi extremist group, Samuel harbored dangerous ideologies and a deep-seated hatred for the LGBTQ+ community. His internet history revealed a fascination with violence and hate speech, and his notebooks were filled with chilling phrases like, "Murder isn't boring." He didn't just hate Blaze for who he was, a forensic psychologist later said. He hated him because Blaze represented everything Samuel couldn't accept about himself. Samuel's internal struggles added another layer to the tragedy. He had reportedly repressed his own sexuality for years, living in fear of rejection and judgment from his ultra-conservative family. Blaze, by contrast, lived openly and authentically, a stark contrast that may have ignited Samuel's rage. The case against Samuel was overwhelming. In July 2024, after years of legal delays, he was convicted of first-degree murder with a hate crime enhancement and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Yet, for Blaze's family, the verdict brought little solace. Blaze was the light of our lives, his mother said during the sentencing. Samuel didn't just take him from us. He destroyed a future filled with promise, love, and hope. Blaze Bernstein's story is not just a tale of loss. It's a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked hate, the perils of prejudice, and the devastating consequences of a society that allows such darkness to fester. His life, though tragically cut short, continues to inspire others through the Blaze It Forward campaign, which promotes acts of kindness in his memory. Blaze's legacy is one of love and light, his father said. But we must confront the darkness that took him from us, so that no other family has to endure this pain. The night Blaze vanished. Every disappearance begins with questions. Where did they go? Why didn't they call? And most haunting of all, what happened to them? For Blaze Bernstein, the answers to these questions would only come after days of anguish, and the truth would leave his family and community shattered. The final days at home. Blaze Bernstein's winter break in December 2017 was filled with the kind of moments families treasure. Cooking meals together, sharing laughter over late-night conversations, and dreaming about the future. Blaze, a sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania, had returned to Lake Forest, California, to spend the holidays with his parents and siblings. Blaze was in high spirits, exploring his creative writing projects and considering a career in medicine. He was the kind of person who could bring warmth to any room. His mother described him as a unicorn, rare, unique, and unforgettable. But as the holiday season wound down, so did Blaze's time at home. He was scheduled to fly back to Pennsylvania on January 3, 2018. He had one last night before returning to school, a night his family thought he'd spend resting and preparing for his trip. Instead, Blaze made plans he didn't share with them. A secret meeting. On the evening of January 2nd, Blaze told his parents he was going out, but gave no details. It wasn't unusual for him to catch up with friends before leaving town, so his departure didn't raise any alarms. But as the hours stretched on, his parents grew uneasy. By the next morning, Blaze was nowhere to be found. His bed remained untouched, and he hadn't taken any of his essentials, his wallet, retainer, glasses, or keys. His phone went straight to voicemail. When his mother tried calling him, there was only silence on the other end. At first, we thought maybe he stayed out late with friends, his mother recalled. But then the hours turned into a day, and we knew something was wrong. The search begins. Panic set in as Blaze's parents contacted his friends, hoping someone had seen or heard from him. No one had. His father, desperate for answers, accessed Blaze's Snapchat account. What he found would change the course of the investigation. A conversation with a name they didn't recognize, Samuel Woodward. Blaze's father immediately called Samuel, who admitted he had picked Blaze up late that night. Samuel claimed they had driven to Borrego Park, a local spot in Lake Forest. According to him, Blaze had asked to be dropped off there to meet another friend. Samuel insisted he had waited briefly before leaving, never seeing Blaze again. I shouted his name a few times, but there was nothing, Samuel told Blaze's father. I want to find him as much as you do. The tone of Samuel's voice seemed calm, but it felt too rehearsed. Something about his story didn't add up. The first clues. As the community rallied to find Blaze, search teams combed through Borrego Park, handing out flyers and organizing vigils. Volunteers, friends, and even strangers joined the effort. But for days, there was no trace of Blaze. The breakthrough came on January 10, 2018, when heavy rains loosened the soil in Borrego Park. Search teams uncovered a shallow grave covered with branches and dirt. Inside was Blaze's body, brutally stabbed 28 times. The discovery confirmed everyone's worst fears and revealed the horrific violence Blaze had endured. It wasn't just a murder, a detective later remarked. It was personal. The number of wounds spoke to an unrelenting rage, a chilling connection. The police immediately turned their attention to Samuel Woodward, the last person to see Blaze alive. When they searched his car, they found blood spatter on the headliner, evidence of a violent struggle. DNA tests confirmed it was Blaze's blood. Samuel was arrested and became the prime suspect in the case. He told us a story, but the evidence told another, one investigator said. The discovery of motive. The investigation revealed chilling details about Samuel's background. A former classmate of Blaze, Samuel had dropped out of the Orange County School of the Arts and fallen into a dark world of online extremism. He was an active member of a Atomwaffen division, a neo-Nazi group known for promoting violence and hate. The evidence suggested Samuel's actions were fueled by both internal conflict and external hate. Samuel struggled with his own identity, repressing feelings he feared would be unacceptable to his conservative upbringing. Blaze's openness and authenticity may have provoked a deep and dangerous envy. The aftermath. For Blaze's family, the loss was devastating. His mother, father, and siblings were left to grapple with the cruel reality that someone they had never met had robbed them of a son, a brother, a beacon of joy. He was everything we could have hoped for in a son, his father said through tears. And in one night, that was taken from us. Blaze's murder didn't just shock his family. It sent shockwaves through the wider community. The brutal nature of the crime, coupled with its apparent connection to hate and intolerance, raised urgent questions about the world we live in and the darkness that sometimes lurks within it. The portrait of a killer, monsters are not born overnight. They are shaped over years, through choices, ideologies, and the unchecked festering of hatred. Samuel Woodward was not born a killer, but by the time he met Blaze Bernstein, he had already become one. A troubled beginning. Samuel Woodward's childhood in Newport Beach, California, seemed outwardly typical. Raised in a conservative, religious household, he grew up with traditional expectations about masculinity and morality. But as he moved through school, signs of trouble began to emerge. Teachers described Samuel as a quiet but intelligent student. He often seemed disconnected from his peers, struggling to fit in socially. Diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, in his early teens, Samuel had difficulty interpreting social cues, which often left him isolated. His struggles were compounded by his family's strict, traditional beliefs, which left little room for vulnerability or emotional expression. From a young age, Samuel felt like he didn't belong, a former teacher recalled. But instead of seeking help, he turned inward, and eventually, that isolation became anger. Classmates from the Orange County School of the Arts painted a darker picture. Samuel frequently doodled images of violence in his notebooks, guns, knives, and unsettling phrases like, "Murder isn't boring." He also developed an obsession with World War II, particularly Nazi Germany, which classmates initially dismissed as a quirky interest until it grew into something more sinister. He would make these comments about power and strength, like he admired it. One former classmate remembered, "We thought it was just edgy humor, but now I realize it wasn't a joke." A descent into radicalization. After leaving high school, Samuel's isolation deepened. Without the structure of school or meaningful connections, he retreated into the dark corners of the internet. It was there, on forums filled with hate speech and extremist propaganda, that Samuel found a sense of belonging. He became an active member of Atomwaffen Division, a neo-Nazi group that prided itself on violence and terror. Members idolized figures like Adolf Hitler and promoted apocalyptic fantasies of racial and cultural purification. Samuel wasn't just a passive participant. He fully embraced their ideology, attending meetings, wearing their signature skull mask, and participating in training camps where members practiced combat tactics. Atomwaffen didn't just feed his hatred, a counterterrorism expert explained. They gave him permission to act on it. But Samuel's hatred wasn't only directed outward. Investigators uncovered a deeply conflicted young man struggling with his own identity. Despite his outward homophobia and adherence to neo-Nazi beliefs, Samuel's internet history revealed visits to gay dating sites and forums. His Tinder profile was set to match with both men and women. It became clear that Samuel was grappling with his own repressed sexuality, a reality at odds with his extremist ideology and conservative upbringing. He lived in fear of being exposed, a forensic psychologist later said. And that fear turned into rage, both at himself and anyone who reflected the parts of him he couldn't accept. The night of the murder, Samuel's meeting with Blaze wasn't spontaneous. Investigators later uncovered that their Tinder conversations were filled with Samuel testing boundaries, both flirtatious and aggressive. When Blaze agreed to meet, Samuel likely saw it as an opportunity to confront not just Blaze, but his own internal struggle. On the night of January 2nd, 2018, Samuel picked Blaze up from his home, and they drove to Borrego Park. Blaze, ever open and confident, likely saw the meeting as harmless. But Samuel had brought a knife with him, a chilling sign that this was never going to be just a casual meetup. Witnesses later reported hearing raised voices from the direction of the park. It's unclear what triggered the explosion of violence, but investigators believe Samuel felt threatened, not physically but emotionally. Blaze's authenticity and openness likely pushed Samuel to a breaking point. He was everything Samuel feared, the prosecutor later argued. Confident, self-assured, and unapologetically himself, Samuel attacked Blaze with a ferocity that shocked even seasoned detectives. He stabbed him 28 times, each wound a reflection of the rage and hatred Samuel harbored. The overkill nature of the crime suggested it wasn't just about eliminating Blaze. It was about silencing something Samuel couldn't confront within himself. Warning signs ignored. Samuel's capacity for violence wasn't a sudden development. Throughout his teenage years, he exhibited behaviors that, in hindsight, were red flags. Classmates remembered him as someone who made disturbing comments about violence and death, often in a tone that made it difficult to tell if he was joking. One former friend recounted an unsettling conversation where Samuel spoke about how easy it would be to hide a body in the woods. Others described him as off, but no one thought he was capable of something so horrific. "We laughed it off," a classmate admitted. "But now I think about all the times he said something weird, and I wonder why we didn't take it seriously." Even within a Tomwaffen division, Samuel's behavior stood out. While many members reveled in hateful rhetoric, Samuel seemed to internalize it more deeply, personalizing his hatred in a way that made his actions inevitable. He wasn't just spouting slogans, a former member of the group said. He believed every word of it. The fallout. Samuel's arrest and the subsequent investigation revealed the chilling combination of personal turmoil and extremist ideology that led to Blaze's murder. A Tomwaffen division distanced itself from Samuel after his crime brought unwanted attention to the group, but their influence on him was undeniable. For Blaze's family, the revelations about Samuel's background only deepened their grief. Blaze had been targeted not because of anything he did, but because of who he was, a bright, loving young man who represented everything Samuel could never be. "Samuel didn't just take Blaze from us," his father said. "He took him from the world. He took away a future that was filled with love, light, and promise." The monster and the mirror. What makes this case even more haunting is the irony at its core. Samuel killed Blaze not just out of hatred, but out of fear. Blaze, with his openness and courage, was a mirror Samuel couldn't face. By killing Blaze, Samuel wasn't just committing a hate crime. He was attempting to destroy the part of himself he couldn't reconcile. It wasn't just a murder, the prosecutor said. It was a desperate act of self-destruction, with Blaze as the scapegoat. A lesson for society. The story of Samuel Woodward is a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked hate, unresolved personal struggles, and the environments that allow both to thrive. His actions were monstrous, but they were the result of years of neglect from his family, his community, and a society that failed to intervene. "We have to do better," Blaze's father said. "We can't let this happen again. Hate isn't born. It's taught, it's nurtured, and it destroys everything it touches." The investigation and evidence. When the rain uncovered Blaze Bernstein's grave, it wasn't just his body that came to light, it was the truth. A chilling sequence of events began to unravel, and each new discovery brought investigators closer to the mind of a killer. The discovery. On January 10, 2018, after 8 agonizing days of searching, Blaze Bernstein's body was found in Borrego Park. Heavy rains had shifted the soil, exposing the shallow grave where he lay, covered with dirt and branches. Blaze's body bore the evidence of a brutal and personal attack, 28 stab wounds. This wasn't a random act of violence, it was an execution. The discovery shattered the community that had been tirelessly searching for him. For Blaze's family, it was a devastating confirmation of their worst fears. The joyous, loving young man they knew was gone, and the sheer violence of his death pointed to something far darker. "This wasn't just a murder," one detective remarked. "This was a message." And the message was hate. Samuel's story begins to crumble. Samuel Woodward had been questioned early in the investigation as the last known person to see Blaze alive. He claimed he had picked Blaze up and driven him to Borrego Park, where Blaze supposedly left to meet another friend. Samuel said he waited briefly, then left, hearing nothing more from Blaze after that. At first, investigators had little to contradict Samuel's account, but his calm demeanor and oddly specific details raised suspicions. He seemed too composed, as though he had rehearsed his story. The discovery of Blaze's body changed everything. Investigators immediately brought Samuel in for further questioning. His demeanor shifted. Gone was the calm facade, replaced with nervousness and inconsistencies. When pressed, he began to contradict himself, saying he had shouted Blaze's name but heard nothing. "It was the little things," one detective explained. The way he avoided eye contact, the way he overexplained certain details, it was clear he wasn't telling us the whole truth. The forensic breakthrough. A search of Samuel's car provided the first damning piece of physical evidence. Blood spatter was found on the headliner above the passenger seat. Forensic analysis confirmed it was Blaze's blood. The spatter pattern indicated a violent struggle had occurred inside the vehicle, a detail that directly contradicted Samuel's story of Blaze simply walking away into the park. The discovery of blood was the turning point. Investigators now had physical evidence tying Samuel directly to Blaze's murder, but they needed more to prove intent and motive. A subsequent search of Samuel's home revealed the murder weapon, a knife with traces of blood still on it, despite Samuel's attempts to clean it. DNA testing confirmed the blood belonged to Blaze. This discovery, combined with the blood in the car, painted a clear picture of the violence Blaze endured. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment crime, the prosecutor later said. This was premeditated. Samuel brought that knife with him, knowing exactly what he intended to do. Digital footprints. In the digital age, technology often holds the key to solving crimes, and Blaze's case was no different. Investigators combed through Samuel's phone, social media, and online activity, uncovering a disturbing trail of hate and violence. Samuel's internet history revealed a fascination with far-right extremist groups and a history of browsing forums promoting neo-Nazi ideology. His connections to Atomwaffen division became apparent through photos, chat logs, and even his participation in training camps. These camps weren't just about spreading hate. They trained members in physical combat and psychological manipulation. Even more damning were the messages between Samuel and Blaze on Tinder. While seemingly friendly at first glance, investigators noted an underlying tone of aggression and control in Samuel's words. It was clear that Samuel wasn't meeting Blaze out of innocent curiosity. He was planning something far more sinister. Motive unveiled. As investigators dug deeper into Samuel's life, a chilling motive began to emerge. Samuel's involvement with the Atomwaffen division and his hatred for LGBTQ+ individuals provided the ideological foundation for the crime. But it was his internal conflict that likely pushed him over the edge. Samuel's repressed sexuality and fear of being exposed clashed violently with his extremist beliefs. Blaze, with his openness and confidence, represented everything Samuel hated and feared about himself. Killing Blaze wasn't just an act of violence. It was a desperate attempt to destroy the part of himself he couldn't accept. It wasn't about Blaze as a person, one psychologist later explained. It was about what Blaze represented: freedom, authenticity, and courage. The arrest. With mounting evidence against him, Samuel Woodward was arrested on January 12, 2018. His initial composure had vanished, replaced by defiance. When questioned about the evidence, he refused to cooperate, invoking his right to remain silent. But the evidence spoke louder than words. We had everything we needed, the lead investigator said. The blood, the weapon, the digital footprint, it was all there. We couldn't run from the truth. The community reacts. The arrest sent shockwaves through Orange County and beyond. How could someone so young commit such a heinous act? And how had a seemingly normal teenager fallen into the grip of such hateful ideology? For Blaze's family, the arrest was a step toward justice, but it did little to ease their grief. They knew that no trial or sentence could ever bring Blaze back. He took away more than a life, Blaze's father said. He took away our son's future, his dreams, and all the lives he would have touched. The larger implications. Blaze's murder wasn't just a tragic loss for his family. It was a wake-up call for society. It highlighted the dangers of online radicalization, the persistent threat of hate groups, and the devastating impact of intolerance. This wasn't just one person acting alone, an activist explained. This was the result of a system that fosters hate and allows it to grow unchecked. The trial and judgment. After years of grief and unanswered questions, the courtroom became the stage where the full horror of Blaze Bernstein's murder would finally come to light. For his family, it was not just a fight for justice, but a chance to confront the man who had stolen so much from them. The long road to trial. The wheels of justice turned slowly. Although Samuel Woodward was arrested in January 2018, legal delays and procedural hurdles stretched the case for years. By the time the trial began in April 2024, the crime had faded from national headlines. But for Blaze's family and community, the wounds were still fresh. We waited over 6 years to hear the truth, Blaze's father said. But no amount of time could prepare us for what we would face in that courtroom. prosecution's case. The prosecution painted a chilling portrait of premeditation, hatred, and a crime fueled by both ideology and personal conflict. They argued that Samuel had lured Blaze to Borrego Park under the guise of a casual meeting, knowing full well that he intended to kill him. Key pieces of evidence included the knife, found in Samuel's home, still bearing traces of Blaze's blood despite attempts to clean it. Blood spatter in the car. Forensic analysis confirmed that a violent struggle had occurred inside Samuel's vehicle, contradicting his claims that Blaze had simply walked into the park. Digital evidence. Samuel's connections to a Tomwaffen division, his online history filled with hateful rhetoric, and the Tinder messages exchanged with Blaze all pointed to a calculated crime. This was not a moment of panic, the prosecutor declared. This was a meticulously planned and brutally executed hate crime. The prosecution also focused on the overkill nature of the attack. Blaze had been stabbed 28 times, a level of violence that spoke to deep, personal rage. This wasn't just about silencing Blaze, the prosecutor argued. It was about silencing something Samuel couldn't face within himself. The defense's strategy. Samuel's defense team faced an uphill battle. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and his connection to a hate group left little room for sympathy. However, they attempted to shift the narrative, portraying Samuel as a deeply troubled young man grappling with mental health issues and a repressive upbringing. Key arguments from the defense included autism spectrum disorder, ASD. They argued that Samuel's diagnosis made him socially awkward and emotionally volatile, leading to poor decision-making in high-pressure situations. Fear of outing. Samuel claimed that Blaze had made advances toward him that night, and he panicked, fearing that his conservative father would discover his repressed sexuality. Moment of impulse. The defense insisted that the crime was not premeditated, but a spontaneous act driven by fear and confusion. Samuel himself took the stand, a rare and risky move in such cases. With long, unkempt hair and a demeanor some compared to Charles Manson, he described the night of the murder as a blur of terror and anger. "I was scared," he told the court. "I didn't know what to do. I wasn't thinking clearly." But his testimony did more harm than good. His lack of genuine remorse and his cold, detached tone only reinforced the prosecution's argument that this was not an impulsive act, but a calculated murder. Blaze's family speaks. One of the most emotional moments of the trial came when Blaze's parents took the stand. Through tears, they described the devastating impact of his murder, not just on their family, but on everyone who had known and loved Blaze. "You didn't just kill my son," Blaze's father said, staring directly at Samuel. "You killed his dreams, his future, and all the good he would have brought into this world." Blaze's mother spoke about the unbearable silence left in her son's absence, the empty chair at the dinner table, the birthdays he would never celebrate, and the life he would never live. "Blaze was everything you'll never be," she said, her voice steady but trembling with emotion. "He was kind, courageous, and full of love. And you're full of hate." The verdict. On July 3, 2024, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached their decision. Samuel Woodward was found guilty of first-degree murder with a hate crime enhancement. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read, and Blaze's family held one another tightly, tears streaming down their faces. The hate crime enhancement meant that Samuel would face life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Blaze's family, it was a bittersweet moment, a measure of justice, but one that could never undo the loss they had endured. "We're grateful for the verdict," Blaze's father said outside the courtroom. "But there's no such thing as closure. We'll carry this pain for the rest of our lives." The judge's statement. Before sentencing, the judge delivered a powerful statement that resonated with everyone in the courtroom. "This case is a tragedy on many levels," he said. "A brilliant young man's life was cut short in an act of hatred and violence, while another young man threw away his own future, consumed by ideologies that destroy rather than build. But make no mistake, only one person in this room made the choice to kill. And for that, you must face the consequences." The legacy. Blaze's murder left an indelible mark on his family, friends, and the broader community. But from their grief, his parents found a way to honor his memory. They launched the Blaze It Forward campaign, encouraging acts of kindness and community building in his name. Blaze's life was about love and light, his mother said. And that's what we want his legacy to be. Not this senseless act of hate, but the kindness he inspired in others. The trial also sparked broader conversations about hate crimes, online radicalization, and the lingering prejudice against LGBTQ+ individuals. For many, Blaze's story was a reminder of the work that still needs to be done to create a world where everyone can live authentically and without fear. Where we tie the story together and deliver a powerful, thought-provoking conclusion. Let me know your thoughts. Reflection and lessons. Some stories end with justice. Others, like Blaze Bernstein's, linger in the hearts of those left behind, reminding us of the work still to be done. His life was stolen by hatred, but his legacy challenges us to confront that darkness and strive for a brighter, kinder world. The legacy of Blaze Bernstein. Blaze Bernstein was more than just a victim. He was a vibrant young man whose love for life inspired everyone around him. His family, devastated by his loss, refused to let his light be extinguished. They channeled their grief into action, creating the Blaze It Forward movement, a campaign encouraging random acts of kindness in Blaze's name. Blaze believed in making the world a better place, his mother said. If his life can inspire even one person to choose love over hate, then his legacy lives on. The movement gained momentum, spreading across communities and social media. Thousands of people shared stories of acts of kindness they had performed or received, all in honor of Blaze. From small gestures like buying coffee for a stranger to larger commitments like volunteering in shelters, the campaign became a beacon of hope in the wake of tragedy. A wake-up call for society. Blaze's murder wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a societal failure. It exposed the persistent dangers of hate crimes, the insidious reach of online radicalization, and the prejudice that still exists against LGBTQ+ individuals. Samuel Woodward's descent into extremism didn't happen in isolation. It was nurtured by online echo chambers where hateful ideologies festered unchecked. Atomwaffen division and groups like it prey on vulnerable individuals, offering them a sense of belonging while feeding their darkest impulses. This wasn't just one man's crime, an activist explained. It was the result of a system that allows hate to thrive online, in communities, and in the shadows. For the LGBTQ+ community, Blaze's murder was a painful reminder of the risks they still face. Despite progress in acceptance and rights, prejudice and violence remain stark realities. Blaze's courage in living authentically became both his strength and the target of another's hatred. The danger of unchecked hate. Blaze's murder also highlighted the terrifying intersection of internal conflict and external hatred. Samuel Woodward's inability to reconcile his identity with his extremist beliefs created a deadly storm. His fear of being outed, compounded by his affiliation with a hate group, turned into rage. Hate doesn't just harm the person it's directed at, a forensic psychologist explained. It destroys the person carrying it. Samuel's life was consumed by the hatred he couldn't control, and it ultimately led to the destruction of 2 lives, Blaze's and his own. The case became a rallying cry for addressing the root causes of such tragedies, combating hate groups, fostering inclusive communities, and providing support for those struggling with identity and acceptance. Lessons from tragedy. Blaze Bernstein's story serves as a stark reminder of the power of choice. Samuel Woodward chose hate. He chose to embrace an ideology that thrived on division and destruction. He chose to let his internal struggles manifest as violence. But Blaze, in his short life, made different choices. He chose to live openly, to love freely, and to share his light with the world. Those choices, though they made him a target, also made him an inspiration. Blaze's life challenges us to be better, his father said. To choose kindness, to stand against hate, and to create a world where no one has to live in fear for being who they are. As the trial concluded and the years passed, Blaze's story continued to resonate. His family and supporters used his legacy to spark change, advocating for stronger measures against hate crimes and online extremism. We can't undo what happened to Blaze, his mother said, but we can ensure that his story makes a difference. We can fight for a world where no one else has to endure this pain. Blaze's legacy isn't just a reminder of the work that remains, it's a call to action, to challenge prejudice wherever it exists, to support those who feel unseen and unheard, to confront the systems that allow hate to thrive and replace them with systems of love, acceptance, and understanding. The final reflection. Blaze Bernstein's murder was an unspeakable tragedy, but his life, and the way he lived it, left a mark that hatred couldn't erase. In the end, his story isn't just about loss, it's about resilience. It's about the power of love to overcome hate, even in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Blaze's life mattered, his mother said, and his legacy will continue to matter as as long as we keep his light alive. For those who hear Blaze's story, the choice is clear. We can turn away, or we can take up his torch, spreading kindness, fighting hate, and ensuring that his life, though cut short, continues to inspire. The fight against hate isn't a one-time battle, his father added. It's a commitment, and it starts with each of us.